we are told by this administration, and they love to gaslight over and over again, it's not about press conferences. It's not about interviews, which, by the way, if you look at news conferences just quickly, Joe Biden, as long as they've been tracked, this is since the Reagan years, he's only done more news conferences than Reagan. He has answered less questions than President Obama, Trump, Clinton, Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and George W. Bush. The lowest next to that in their first 2 years of their presidency was still about double. So, I mean, you're talking about significantly less interviews, less news conferences. But then Karine Jean-Pierre, White House press secretary, will tell us, but he's answered more questions. Now, I want to go right to Ric Grenell, who is a senior advisor at the ACLJ, former acting director of national intelligence, but also has an extensive background in communications. Because, Rick, right away, it's total gaslighting, and people saw it yesterday when President Biden had a press conference with the South Korean president, and we can put up on the screen for people so they can see it while we talk about it. And he not only had the card of who to go to ask a question, but he literally had their question and his response written out. I don't think Rick, Karine Jean-Pierre, or any American media outlet should then count any of those kind of questions as an actual question to the president.
Well, it's pathetic. It's propaganda. It's government-sponsored media. This Los Angeles Times reporter should be fired. The editor who approved doing this should be fired. This is a word-for-word question. We aren't stupid. So what the media in Washington, D.C. is trying to spin right now is, we gave the subject matter, and that's pretty standard. It's not standard to give a word-for-word question so that it appears on the card of the president. I just tweeted out the picture, and it's really outrageous. You've got the reporter's picture, you've got the reporter's name, you've got the exact question on Joe Biden's card, and then he starts to take questions, and you actually see in the video the person who's walking around with the mic like Oprah is literally walking toward the LA Times reporter before Joe Biden calls on the LA Times reporter. This was scripted. The White House staff knew who was coming. They all had a cheat sheet. This is the reporter that's getting the question. So the young staffer starts to walk over there before they're even called on. This is so outrageous, and the silence from the rest of the media in Washington, D.C. is deafening. They're all just trying to put a bow on this and pretend like there's nothing to see here. The rest of us outside of Washington, D.C., know it's pathetic, and we're embarrassed by what's been transpiring in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I mean, that's the second point I want to make, Rick, is that it means that the White House is able to get these media outlets to go along with this and play a game like they're really getting to ask a question, when in fact they aren't. I mean, it's just acting at that point.
Dictators around the world are looking at what's happening in Washington, D.C., and they're jealous. They're jealous of the system because it's totally controlled by government. You've got government mouthpieces now. Look, if you're listening to this broadcast and you're as outraged as I am, and you're so frustrated, I just have to say that there is one thing you can do. You can talk about these issues louder. You can write a small check to ACLJ. You can talk about the work that groups like the ACLJ are doing. I would throw out Judicial Watch. I'm not affiliated with Judicial Watch, but they do great work. Start supporting these organizations that are holding Washington, D.C. politicians to account. We do great work. We have a team of lawyers. We're pushing out FOIA requests, demanding that the media, demanding that the government sees their hypocrisy. We're pointing it out. We're calling out corruption. This is how we have to go to war. This is the combat that we have to do, because without this, we have a bunch of LA Times reporters and New York Times reporters and CNN reporters who all get together and they're laughing at the rest of America because they're putting one over on us. We can't allow that to happen. We're going to lose our country if we don't start fighting.
Yeah, I want to turn to more of these kind of communications, just the way they're just trying to spin it. So we played it for people on the broadcast already, which is John Kirby, announcing again, taking the question on the fact that it was the Taliban that killed the leader of ISIS-K, who was responsible for organizing the bomb attack that killed 13 American servicemen and women during their botched withdrawal of Afghanistan. Surprised at that statement, he didn't blame the Trump administration somehow for something there. But what he did was say it was proof that their withdrawal worked. As if like this was like the Taliban did this on purpose. The Taliban did this, Rick, because they were in a fight with ISIS-K. They weren't directly targeting to avenge Americans. But yet that's the kind of tone that they say. It's like, well, see, our withdrawal worked. As if, what about the 13 dead Americans? I mean, but he actually got up there and he says it. And I guess, the news just reports it.
Yeah, don't forget that the John Kirby and the original government mouthpieces told us that we had killed terrorists in Afghanistan in response to all of this. And what we found out weeks later, or days later, actually, was that we killed children. That it wasn't the terrorists. And so this is a repackaging of a failure, and they're trying to put a bow on it to pretend like our failure wasn't a failure. See, we told you it really was strategically brilliant. But I also have to say, they spent a lot of time at the Biden White House saying that the withdrawal from Afghanistan was Donald Trump's fault. And then they messed it up there at the end. And now they're saying, oh, see how the president's decision to withdraw was such a brilliant idea because now we've got terrorists killing terrorists. This is an administration that will just say anything. There's no strategy. It's failure after failure, and then they repackage it as a success, and the media go along with it. It's really pathetic.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's going to, again, take center stage once again, not because Joe Biden wants it to, not because John Kirby wants it to, but because, even in his announcement, he doesn't even mention that these kind of anything going on in the world. It wasn't anywhere in Joe Biden's presidential announcement or any of the bad things happening around the world. But we even see a move on Capitol Hill. And I wanted to ask you about this. We saw Congressman McCall, who chairs the House Foreign Affairs Committee, because the State Department released that 12-page summary of the after-action report about the withdrawal in Afghanistan. And the 12-page summary was just a blaming of the Trump administration. He said, I want to see all 87 pages. I think that at least because there's Republicans in charge in the committees in the House, Rick, that they are not letting these issues go by the wayside. They're not forgetting that the gaslighting, the spin, that the Biden administration is trying to blame a previous administration. They do this for every problem now. But what do you think about this move to get that report so that the American people actually understand why this was so botched?
Yeah, I think my first reaction is just to say, thank God we've got the Republicans in control of the House. They're doing yeoman's work right now. What they're trying to do is be transparent. They're trying to get people to understand that there's a whole nother side to this that we haven't been told over the last couple of years, whether it's Fauci, whether it's the Afghanistan withdrawal, a whole bunch of issues need to be uncovered. And the chairman is doing a great job of that. And I know that he's looking at a whole bunch of foreign issues. I know personally that they're looking at the Balkans and the disaster that is now unfolding there. And so I like transparency. Transparency is not political. It's not partisan. It's something that we should all be demanding.
All right. Rick, as always, we appreciate all of your insight into these issues.